Well, here she is. She's an Oscar winner, a Grammy winner, member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and a true New Yorker, which we love. Carly Simon, welcome to the show.
Would you repeat those awards again?
Oscars, Grammys, Songwriter Hall of Fame.
Kidding. It's okay.
You spend a lot of time in Martha's Vineyard, which I think is really a magical place. I mean, I've only been there a few times, but even if it's just for a week, it's just such a wonderful place.
The Vineyard is, of course, having lived there all my life, there's a certain amount of taking it for granted. However, I do wake up every morning, come into my house 5 or 6 times a day, go out 6 or times a day into the, just into the lawns, the gardens, the forests, around where my horse and donkey and sheep are, and I'm just amazed by the changing of the light, amazed by every single bush and tree and
it's magical. It really is.
The new flowers it's incredible how in love I am, truly in love with that place.
But born here in Manhattan, do you ever miss it? When you come down here now, is it nice to be here? Is it kind of fun or?
I wasn't born in Manhattan for long.
Yeah.
I mean, my family moved out of the city because my mother really, really didn't like the city. She just she didn't believe in breathing the air that the city had to offer, and so we moved to Riverdale, which is where I went to school, and spent a lot of the summers on Martha's Vineyard, and that's how I first became acquainted with it.
Your son, your great son, Ben Taylor, you're talking about mothering before. He's been on this show a few times.
He has. That's great.
Yeah, and you now have a great new album, and it's a new album with re-recorded versions of some of your greatest songs. And was Ben sort of instrumental in sort of getting you to do this?
He was. He really was. He was the guy behind the job. He's phenomenally, I think, a brilliant musician, and he comes by it naturally, and he also practices a lot, as does my daughter, who does not make more than one appearance on this album, but she is
Sally, right?
Sally.
Yep.
Sally Taylor, both Ben and Sally Taylor. Ben really put on his producer's cap for this album and was instrumental in getting me to do it, because I wasn't interested in doing anything in the summer of 2008 except for just being furious. And so Ben said, "Come on, we've got a whole lot of musicians around the house. Let's retranslate them. Let's reinterpret your old songs." So they're not re-recorded as much as they're really rethunk.
Right.
He wanted me to do everything acoustically.
Yeah.
And so it's like an unplugged version of You're So Vain, unplugged version of Anticipation, unplugged there are a couple of exceptions. You Belong to Me is not an unplugged version. It's just a very different take on You Belong to Me.
Yeah.
But yes, but it's almost like doing them in a different language, because they are so in many ways very different from their original versions.
Well, and Ben, like you said, is playing on air too, and I want to play You're So Vain, and it's funny because I'm looking at your website. You have a whole section devoted to how everyone for years has been so fascinated about You're So Vain and who the song is about. You got pictures of Warren Beatty, Chris Christopherson, Cat Stevens, and Mick Jagger.
Now, when you say I have pictures of them,
or the website has pictures of them,
yes, but that's not my fault.
Okay, but it's very interesting. It's a cultural phenomenon that this has been going on for so long.
Well, what's interesting is that it's interesting.
You're right. It is. Yeah, and you actually have the website has a chronology of press coverage of when that song came out up until now, and of everybody trying to figure it out. A Rolling Stone item from 1973 up to an appearance you did on Ellen, and you still haven't told who it is. And I'm not even going to ask you who it is, but I want to ask you about that song and the writing of it. And do you remember the time that you wrote it and where you were and who produced it? And
I guess I started writing it, fairly. I mean, it took me about a year to write it, and I wrote it. Let's see, when did I recorded it in 1972?
Yeah.
So I must have been writing it in about 1971. I must have started it, and I had this notebook, this large kind of uncomfortable to carry around notebook. I remember it. Now I write in tiny little notebooks.
Old school songwriter stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Old school, yes. But this was actually, if only I'd known how embarrassing I would have felt about it now. But this was a Gucci notebook. I don't do anything with names of the
Right, yeah.
of the designer now, unless it's designed by me or something, or I want to promote a friend. But so I used to carry this notebook around with me and put in ideas as they came to me, and I don't remember how I came up with the idea of "You're So Vain, You Probably Think This Song Is About You," but I came up with it, and I put it in the notebook just on a single line on a single page, and there it stood, and then there were other lines on other pages in subsequent days, and and then there was another incident where I was at a party, and somebody came into the party, and the person next to me said, "Doesn't he look as if he's walking onto a yacht?" And or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I took out the big lumbering notebook and I wrote that down. You walked into the party like you were walking onto a yacht. So I mean, it's basically about lifting other people's words, phrases, interpretations, whatever, or sometimes it's usually my own, but sometimes it's other people's, and I just kind of write it down verbatim and then change it later or not or whatever. But so I had that in the notebook, maybe some 20 pages on from "You're So Vain, You Probably Think This Song's About You." And then about 2 months after that, I was on a plane going to Palm Springs for an Electra convention, and the person who was sitting next to me on the plane, my friend Billy, said to me, look at your coffee. It looks like there are clouds in it." And so I put down, I had some dreams, they were clouds in my coffee, or maybe just clouds in my coffee, and then later on I added, I had some dreams, they were clouds in my coffee. And I didn't relate those three things to each other at all. And then I got back to New York, and I had this melody in my head that was the melody really to what eventually became "You're So Vain," but it had very different lyrics. And they went, "Bless you, Ben, you came in where nobody else left off. There I was all by myself, hiding up in my loft. Talking trouble took my time, and singing some sad songs. I had some dreams, they were clouds in my coffee." I added that on the very last one. "Clouds in my coffee." And it was a completely different song. And, I didn't know who this Ben was. Ben, of course, then 3 or 4 years after that became my son.
Yeah.
It became the name that I chose for our son. And so I rather liked the tune, didn't have a chorus for it. Went back through my notebook, thought, I wonder what I was thinking. I wonder if there's anything that strings these things together. And then I thought, wait a second. The guy that walked into the party probably is the guy who I'm writing the song about. So let me continue on that, on that theme. And so I began thinking about certain episodes, certain details of things that had happened to me or me and him or him. And pretty soon it was, I had the song. Instead of "Bless you, Ben, you came in when nobody else left off," I realized that that I could make I could make it match. You walked into the party like you were walking onto a yacht. That syllabolically it worked.
Yeah.
And so, I turned that into the opening line of the song. And then the details flowed from there, as, when I realized who I was writing about and what this song was about and what my relationship to this guy was. And then, this was the Vain Man. It was called The Ballad of a Vain Man for up until the very final artwork. It was called The Ballad of a Vain Man.
For the single, right, or the album, yeah.
Yeah. It was, all during, even when we did the orchestration of it in London, and, the string parts all have Ballad of a Vain Man on.
Really quick, when you did the session, Jagger came in to do the background vocals. Was that just like a quick phone call? Hey, you ran into him somewhere and say, hey, why don't you sing on this? Or how did that happen? How did that come about?
Well, no. We were in London. I was in London recording the album with Richard Perry. Richard's idea was that Harry Nilsson, who was floating around town and was a good friend of Richard and of the studio and everybody came in one night with a bottle of scotch or something like that, and I think Richard had previously asked him if he wanted to do backgrounds on this song, and so Harry and I went into this little booth and sang it on the same mic on either sides of a non-directional mic, and we were singing it together when there was a phone call from me that I was supposed to take in the lounge. I took it in the lounge, and it was Mick Jagger, and he said, "Hey, baby, what you doing?" And I said, "Why don't you come over? Harry and I are singing background vocals to a song of mine. I would love you to hear it." And so, he did. He was open in those days to I don't know, being spontaneous. Not that he's not now. I don't know what he's like now. And so he came over, and so Mick, Harry, and myself were singing on this non-directional mic, and there was such a charisma between myself and Mick, and so much dynamic between us, that Harry said, "Hey, the two of you do it. There's, I think that it should just be the two of you. It sounds great. I seem to be getting in the way. I'm going to step out on this one." So that's how it got to be just the two of us.
Anticipation. I want to play that one. And you do write a little thing about anticipation in the liner notes. But again, another one of your huge hits. Tell me about the inspiration for that song and the writing of it when you first wrote it.
I wrote Anticipation also in 1971. I was waiting for my friend Yusef, who wasn't called Yusef then, to come over and have dinner at my apartment. And I was so nervous about his coming over. I didn't know whether the sauce was going to be okay for the chicken.
You were making sauce?
I think I made chicken with cherries.
Nice.
Bing cherries. And so I was waiting for this to happen, and being that I was very excited about it, and I wasn't in the now. I was one step ahead of myself all the way through, and so I was so excited that I couldn't even figure out what to wear. I couldn't figure out how to comb my hair. I couldn't figure out anything. So I thought I'm living too much in anticipation. I'm not living enough in the now. And so I sat down with my guitar on the bed, and I was already in love with Cat Stevens' songs. And so I wrote it a la Cat Stevens. I wrote a song the way I thought a Cat Stevens song might sound. And I ended up dedicating the album of Anticipation to Cat Stevens, and Cat Stevens sang on some of the songs on the album.
Carly Simon's new album is Never Been Gone. Carly, thank you so much for coming by the show.
Thank you so much for having me.